Okay, so we're continuing the last group of simonim in Hilchos Chametz in Shagged, which is Peites through Tzadi Aleph, and we already started that in the previous year. So let's just recap a little bit what we spoke about in the previous year. Hopefully we'll be able to get into what we have to talk about into next year. So we were discussing what happens if you have a partnership of Chametz on Pesach, and then you divide that partnership up after Pesach. So we spoke about the idea of Breira, and the idea of Breira is that when a partnership splits up, and the truth is that Breira extends to other areas as well, but when it comes to partnerships, when we split up a partnership, do we view it as if each person got the portion that was really always his from the beginning of the partnership, right? Their money, or in this case, chametz, was mixed together. And then, but really it always was that some of them own part of the chametz, the other person owned the other part, and when they divide it up, we view it as if it magically divided the parts that always were theirs to begin with, or do we say, no, not necessarily? And the maskana of the sugya halacha is that we do rely on breira in cases of derabanan, and we do not rely on breira for cases d'oraisa, which the Shagas Aryeh really redefined for us to say that we view breira as a suffix of how it works, and therefore by d'oraisas we're going to be machmer, which generally means we're going to say ein breira, right? He didn't really speak about cases where on a d'oraisa level the chumrah could be to say yesh breira, but theoretically we could probably come up with a case where yesh breira would be the chumrah, and if so, you'd probably have to be machmer for that. And more specifically for our case, when we're talking about chametz shavar of Pesach, which is only Nisur D'Rabbanan, so we're going to be mekel. And even though yesh breira is generally the kula, in our situations we found cases where yesh breira would be the chumrah, and perhaps ein breira would be the kula, and you'd be able to rely on ein breira for chametz shavar of Pesach. So what would be the case? The case would be where a yid and a guy had chametz together, and the Yisrael did not sell his chametz on Pesach. Therefore, after Pesach is over, his portion of the partnership is really aser in Hana. It's takana d'Rabbanan. So if we say yesh breira, so then the Yisrael got his portion, and that's the portion which is aser. If we would say ein breira, so maybe there's a way to view it as if he got the chametz that was really mutter in Hana, the chametz that originally belonged to the guy in the partnership. So we saw two ways of understanding ein breira. We saw the opinion of Rashi, which is that it's viewed as if it's completely mixed together. So that's not going to help us in our case, because if we say yesh breira, he's going to get the chametz which is fully aser. If we say ein breira, he's going to get a mixture of chametz, some of which is aser, some of which is mutter. And therefore there's no way to really view it as any benefit for him. The yesh breira or the ein breira is always going to be aser, his chametz that he gets after dividing it up. However, according to Tosfos, ein breira means that we don't know what the chametz was originally. The truth is, I think Tosfos makes sense also logically. Right? Breira means we know how it worked, and ein breira means we don't know. So if we don't know, it could be that the portion that he got was the portion that we would view as if it belonged to the guy from the beginning, in which case he would be able to use that chametz after Pesach. That would be ein breira on a case of a d'Rabbanan, and perhaps we could be mekel in that situation. So Tosfos had asked a few questions on Rashi, and I believe that's where we were holding now, is to discuss at least one of the questions that asked on Rashi. He asked two questions, one from Gemara in Gittin, one from Gemara in Bechoros. The question of Gemara in Bechoros was out of our league to discuss for now, but the Gemara in Gittin, the Shagas Aryeh does discuss, and so let's discuss that question on Rashi. So Tosfos' question on Rashi was on the Gemara in Gittin, Mem Ches Amud Aleph, which is the 7th Mar Makom, Os Zayin of the Mar Makomos, and the Gemara says over there, Amar of Yosef, Rav Yosef says, Ilav da Amar of Yochanan, Kinyan Peres ki Kinyan Haguf Dami, Lo Matzah Yad Haragla Beis HaMedrash. If Rav Yochanan wouldn't say that acquiring the Peres is like a Kinyan Haguf, maybe this we discussed a little bit in one of the Gemaras we saw in last week's shir, which is what would be if someone sold someone the rights for the fruit of the land, or another way to say such a thing would be if he sold him the land only for a small portion of time. And we discussed that would apply if a person would sell land in the time of Yovel, Right? So the land is eventually going to return to the buyer. He's really only sold the rights to use the land in the interim. So that's that we call kinyan peiros. So kinyan peiros, according to Rav Yochanan, is like the person owns the land itself. If Rav Yochanan wouldn't have said that, then, right, to translate the words of the Gemara, he wouldn't be able to find his hands and feet in the Beis Medrash, means that he'd be stuck with a major kasha. And why would that be? Damar Asi Rav Yochanan, Asi says the name Rav Yochanan, ha'achin shecholku l'kuchos heim, machzirin zelazeh biovel. Brothers that split up a property are as if they bought it from one another, and therefore they have to return it to each other, means to re-divide the land at every yovel. And therefore, according to Rav Yochanan, the brothers are only a kinyan peiros on the land. It's an idea of ein breira, as we said before. It's ein breira. They don't know that they got the right portion, and therefore we view it as if they bought their portion off the other brother. And if he would also hold, if he would also hold, that would not be considered as if they own the land. So that no one would ever be able to bring bikurim unless it's one after one, and there's a single son after a single son all the way back to Yeshua ben Nun. Because then he's not dividing with any brother, so therefore the entire Yerusha is his, and it's really his. He didn't buy it, he inherited it. So that type of person would be able to bring bikurim, but that would be a very rare case. That would not explain the entire parsha bikurim that the Torah wrote. Obviously the intent of the Torah when it said to bring bikurim was for all Yorshim could bring bikurim. So if we would combine those two shitas together, the shita of ein breira, and that brothers that split up the property are considered as if they are only buyers until the next yovel, and therefore it's a kinyan peiros, and we would hold that kinyan peiros would not be able to bring bikurim, so then you'd have this problem. So Rav Yosef is pointing out, since Rav Yochanan holds that kinyan peiros is like a kinyan aguf, and they could bring bikurim, so he avoids this issue. Okay, now Tosfos asks against Rashi, and the lashon was, if you want to find it in that Tosfos, where was that Tosfos? It was Vav. So he asks the question, he says, Ha'afilu mandamar. So if you want to see it inside again, it's an Os Vav, and it's in the second column, and as you have like the three columns there, the one on top and then the two underneath it. So in that second column, in the middle of the column, it says, Ha'afilu L'mandamar ein breira, even according to the shita of ein breira, according to the way Rashi understands it, Yishlo bevadai chelik bo, demechayv bikurim. He certainly has a portion which is chayv bikurim. V'hamoser shu chulin matzi makdish lei, and the rest which is chulin he could be makdish it. Can I read in Parak Hasfina, like we say in Parak Hasfina? So what Tosfos is asking is, according to Rashi, ein breira, which is what Rav Yochanan holds, means that it's all mixed. If it's all mixed, that let's say, for example, you have two brothers that split the property of their father. So then each brother has property which is 50% his, and 50% belongs to the other brother, but he bought it. Right? So half of it is a kinyan hakuf, and half of it is kinyan peiros. So even if we would say that kinyan peiros doesn't bring bikurim, he now has fruit. Half of it is his, and half of it's, only likichas peiros, and it's all his, but it's just a question of what type of ownership he has on it. So on part of it, he has to bring bikurim. That for sure he has to bring. The other half, let's say he doesn't have to bring bikurim, but he'll be makdish. There's a whole discussion about Babas exactly how to get around an issue where you have a safek bikurim, but in this case, he has bikurim and he'll have to bring it. And so what's the issue? Why would Rav Yochanan hold that there's no bikurim if he would hold ein breira, plus kinyan peiros is not kinyan haguf, but there's at least going to be a portion which is kinyan haguf? That's supposed to be a question against Rashi. Now, the Shagas Aryeh asks against Tosfos' question, and he says that he doesn't really understand why Tosfos is saying that there's a portion which is chayv bikurim and the other part is chulin, and he has to do this whole trick. He says the truth is that you're allowed to bring bikurim even if you bought property and it's only a kinyan peiros. You bring the bikurim, you just don't read the psukim. Right, so therefore, everything here is for sure bikurim. It's just a question of whether you can read the psukim or not. So therefore, you don't have to deal with the idea of chulin ba'azara, because the whole bundle is really bikurim. It's just a question whether you can say the psukim. Now, in half of it, you could say the psukim. So in the half you say the psukim, you say the psukim, the other half not. And that's really, says the Shaggad, should be the question against Rashi. Is not about bringing the bikurim, it should be about the psukim. According to Rashi, the question is only going to be about reading the psukim, and according to the way Rashi understands Ein Breira, why should he not be able to say the psukim? Part of the fruit he is really bringing from his own land. And therefore, he should be able to say the psukim, at least on that portion. So to answer this question, the Shaggad Aryeh points out a Gemara in Bava Basra Daf Chav Zayin Amabis, and that's Os Ches in the Marabakomos, and it says as follows: Kiyasar Rav Dimi came. Amar, he said, Ba'imine Rish Lakish Rav Yochanan. Rish Lakish asked Rav Yochanan, Ilan hasamach lametzar besoch yud vav ama mahu. What's the halacha about a tree which is within 16 amos of the border? Because we assume that a tree generally takes nourishment, and the roots grow out, really, 16 amos from the base of the tree. And therefore, in a situation where he's within 16 amos of the border, that means part of the roots of his tree are really in someone else's land. Amar lei, so he said to him, Gazlan hu, he has the status of a Gazlan, ve'im avinu menu bikurim, and therefore he can't bring bikurim. Kiyasa Rabbin, Amar Rav Yochanan, Rabbin came, he said in the name of Rav Yochanan, Echad ilan hasamuch lamitzar, ve'echad ilan hanota, mevi bikuri. That really even a tree which is next to the border, and even a tree which leans over into someone else's property, you could bring bikurim and you could read the psukim. Shalmanaskin hinchol Yoshua liyisrael sa'aretz, because it's based on this premise that Yoshua allowed Klal Yisrael to take the land, and when he divided up the land, it was on condition that you're mochel the part that someone's tree is taken from your land. So if people could have trees near the border, it's not a problem of Gezel, and not only not a problem of Gezel, but he could even bring the bikurim. So, according to Rav Dimi, right, we had two shittas over here. There was Rav Dimi that said they can't bring the bikurim, and then we had Rav that said they could bring the bikurim. According to Rav Dimi, that you can't bring the bikurim, he requires that all of the roots of the tree are in your own land. If so, when we have the case of the Yarshim that we spoke about, that part of the land is his Kinyan Haguf, and part of the land is only his Kinyan HaPeros, so that means that a tree which is in that land, or even a stalk of wheat which is in that land, is taking its nourishment half from land which is his Kinyan Haguf, and half from land which is his only Kinyan Peros. Now, if we say that Kinyan Peros, you can't bring Bikurim and say the Psukim, so then each fruit, you really can't say the Psukim of Bikurim, because part of its nourishment came from land, which it's not Gezel, because he has the rights to use it, but it's not his land in a Kinyan Haguf, and therefore would not be qualified to be able to read the Psukim of Bikurim. And therefore he would have no fruit that he could read the Psukim for. So that would explain the question of the Gemara, or the statement of the Gemara, that if Rav Yochanan would hold these two things together, that Kinyan Peros, you don't say the Bikurim, say the Psukim of Bikurim, plus the fact that people that inherit and split up property are not considered as if they have a Kinyan Haguf, at least on the entire land, so then you would have a problem, even according to Rashi, that you would not be able to say the Psukim of Bikurim on these fruits. So that would answer up his question against Rashi. And the truth is, it's not even just according to Rav Dimi. Right? We had the two shittas of Rav Dimi and Rabbin. Even according to Rabbin, that you'd be able to bring the Bikurim and read the Psukim, that's only because of the takana of Yoshua ben Nun. But on a Dioraisa level, you would have a problem, and you would not be able to bring the Bikurim. He would agree to Rav Dimi on a Dioraisa level. And we're dealing with, in that Gemara and Gittin, we're dealing with what the Torah meant when it said to bring Bikurim. Obviously the Torah intended that after a couple generations, people would still be bringing Bikurim, so you can't bring in the concept of the takana of Rav Yoshua ben Nun. That's when they're going to be bringing the Bikurim and reading the Psukim, because of his takana, because the pasuk was written without the takana, right? Before the takana was enacted. And the truth is, the Shagat wants to say that even after the Takana of Yeshua, that's only going to make it so it's not considered Gezel, that you could bring the Bikurim, but it's not going to help for reading the Psukim. It's still not considered your land, right? The bottom line is that this fruit got its nourishment from land which wasn't yours. And therefore, it's not going to help to be able to read the Psukim for the Bikurim. And therefore, that explains Rashi, why, even according to Rashi, you wouldn't be able to read the Psukim if you would have these combination of Shittas. Now, you could say, though, that the question against Rashi is really from the fact that it doesn't say in the Gemara in Gittin that you wouldn't be able to bring and say the Psukim of Bikurim. It says you wouldn't be able to bring the Bikurim at all. Now, according to Rashi, you would be able to bring the Bikurim. We just explained how you wouldn't be able to say the Psukim. That's not really what the Gemara said. The Gemara seems to say you wouldn't be able to bring the Bikurim at all. Now, according to Rashi, that wouldn't be true. For sure, you'd be able to bring the Bikurim. It's just a question of reading the Psukim, as we explained. According to Tosos, though, you could explain it kipshuto, that you wouldn't be able to bring the Bikurim at all. Why is that so? So the Shagat explains, this is based on the concept that we spoke about back when we learned Hilchos Kriya Shema, of Kol Harai Labila Ein Bila Ma'akeves, which is that the Torah requires something to be done l'chachila, and you are in a situation where you cannot do it, so then it becomes ma'akiv. Right, so therefore, when it comes to Bikurim, the mitzvah is you're supposed to read the Psukim. If you don't read the Psukim, you're still yotzei the mitzvah of Bikurim. But if you're in a situation where you can't read the Psukim, so then you aren't even yotzei the mitzvah of Bikurim. So therefore, there are many different situations where we do say that a person brings Bikurim but doesn't say the Psukim. Those would be situations where, for whatever reason, either because of the drashos or because of a din d'Rabbanan, he's supposed to bring the Bikurim without saying the Psukim. But if it's a situation where he really should be saying the Psukim, but for some reason he cannot, so then we would have a problem. And according to Tosfos, you could have that issue. Why? Because I have the land that was inherited from the father and then was split up. So according to Tosfos, it might be Kinyan Haguf, right? It might be the portion that was supposed to come to me from the beginning. And therefore I should be bringing these Bikurim with a bracha. On the other hand, there's a possibility that it's all Kinyan Peiros, that it really was the portion that was supposed to belong to my brother, and I, for some reason, got it, so therefore it's as if I bought it from him. I'm going to have to return it to him by Yovel, and therefore I don't have a Kinyan Haguf. If I don't have a Kinyan Haguf, so then I can't say the Psukim. So therefore, L'maisa, what am I going to be able to do? L'maisa, I'm not going to be able to say the Psukim. So if I can't say the Psukim, it's problematic because there's a tzad that I have to say the Psukim. So therefore, there's Bikurim here that l'chachila I have to say the Psukim, and I cannot say the Psukim, and therefore it's ma'akiv the entire mitzvah. And so according to Tosfos, we could understand the Gemara in Gittin kipshuto. So therefore, this sugya in Gittin does seem to work, according to Maskana, the Shagat does work better according to Tosfos. Even though Rashi himself explains he's talking about reading the Psukim. He doesn't say he's talking about bringing the Bikurim itself. But according to Tosfos, we could explain there's a problem with actually bringing the Bikurim itself, which fits better into the actual words of the Gemara. Okay. The Shagat continues the question against the Shita of Tosfos. Tosfos, we quoted a Gemara in Beitza before, which said that if we hold ein breira, so that I'm not going to be able to move my portion of a barrel of wine that we split up on Yontif. And we spoke about that case. There was a barrel of wine that was owned in partnership on Yontif, and therefore, while it's a partnership, we can't move this wine in a place that's outside of the tchum of either one of us. Because we're limited to two tchumim. If we split up the wine, so then if we say yesh breira, so that each one can take his portion to wherever he can walk. If we say ein breira, then they're going to be stuck. Now, according to Tosfos, ein breira is a suffix. And therefore, we should say suffix d'Rabbanan l'hakol. According to Rashi, it's not a suffix. Part of the wine that I have is really wine that in the beginning of Yontif belonged to my partner. I just bought it off of him now once we made the split. So therefore, I'm stuck. That ein breira means you're stuck. That's what the Gemara says. According to Rashi, it makes sense. According to Tosfos, why should I be stuck? Ein breira means it's a suffix. Suffix d'Rabbanan l'kula. And therefore, I should be able to move it to wherever my tchum allows me. So, you could answer that we're machmer because it's a davar sheishul matirin. The concept of davar sheishul matirin is that even in situations where we could be mekel by safek derabanan, if it's something which would become mutter anyway later, so therefore we're not mekel. We have this concept also by mixtures. If I have something treif mixed into a mixture of something which is mutter, and it would normally be, the entire mixture would be permitted because of the mixture, because it's bottle, but it would anyway be mutter later on, so then we just wait until later, and then you don't have the heter bittul. Here also, tchum is only limits me on yontif. When matzah yontif comes, I can take it wherever I want. So therefore we say, even though according to Tosfos would be a safek, whether I have this problem with the tchum or not, we won't say be mekel because of the safek derban. We'll say wait until after yontif to move it wherever you want. Until then you're bound by the tchum of your partner. The difficulty is that Rav Oshia, who said that it's mutter to move the wine, and we said the reason for Rav Oshia is because of yesh breira, he paskined that he was the sheet as we saw that we say yesh breira by dini derabanan. The way the Shagged explained the reason why we say yesh breira by dini derabanan is because of a safek, since we don't know whether there's breira or there's not breira. So therefore, we could be mekel by din derabanan. But we have the same exact problem that we just explained according to Tosfos. He's being mekel on tchumen, which is a davar sheishul matirin. So how come Rav Oshia is mekel to say yesh breira, and he only says yesh breira by din derabanan, which means he's really mesupuk. He's just being mekel because of safek derabanan lahakal. But safek derabanan lahakal doesn't apply in our situation because of a davar sheishul matirin. Therefore, Shagged Aryeh suggests that maybe the reason why Rav Oshia is mekel is because it's a sfeik sfeika. In other words, it's true. If it was just the regular suffix of ein breira, according to Tosfos holds ein breira as a suffix. So one suffix you have to be machmer. And therefore, even though it's only tchum derabanan, we'd have to be machmer. Rav Oshia says yesh breira by a derabanan, and therefore we could be mekel. What does that really mean? Yesh breira by a derabanan is only because of a suffix. So yesh breira is a suffix. Even if we would say ein breira would be a suffix. Right, so it's two sfeikos. Maybe we say ein breira and yesh breira, and if we said yesh breira, you would be able to take it wherever you want on Yom Tov. If we said ein breira, it would also be a suffix whether I could take it wherever I want on Yom Tov. So it's a sfeik sfeika. Maybe we say yesh breira and I can take it wherever I want. Not wherever I want, I can take it to wherever I can walk. Or maybe we say ein breira, even within ein breira there's two ways of looking at it. Either it was always mine, this chelek, and I can take it wherever I want, or it wasn't and I can't. So it's a sfeik sfeik. I have two reasons why I should be able to take it to take it into my tchum and not worry about my friend's tchum. And by a sfeik sfeika, maybe we're going to be mekel even though it's a davar sheishul matirin. That's the suggestion of the Shagged Aryeh. However, the Shagged Aryeh says there's really no sfeik sfeik over here because it's all one suffix. The suffix is, did I get the portion that was mine from the beginning of the partnership? Or did I not? That's one suffix. I could call it yesh breira, ein breira, or I could say even within ein breira I have the suffix. But it's the same exact suffix. When I say yesh breira, what I'm saying is I'm relying on the possibility that I got the portion that was mine to begin with. And if I say ein breira, and ein breira, according to Tosfos, means I don't know what happened. Maybe I got the portion that was always mine. Maybe I got a different portion. It's the same tzad. What I would be relying on to be mekel is that I got the portion that was always mine. You could call it yesh breira, or you could call it one of the possibilities of ein breira, but it's the same one possibility that you're relying on. So that's not a sfeik sfeika. That's considered one suffix. And we just said before, one suffix, we paskin that you have to be machmer by a davar sheishul matirin. So therefore, the Shagged Aryeh answers that there's two different types of sfeikos. There's a suffix mitzias and a suffix in din. Suffix mitzias is we don't know what happened, and therefore we could be mekel by, let's say, in a case of a derabanan. But if it's a davar sheish matirin, so we're going to be machmer. But a suffix in din is different. A suffix in din means I don't have a suffix of what happened. I have a suffix in the halacha. In other words, do I say yesh brira or ein brira is a suffix in halacha. It's not a suffix in what actually happened. Yesh brira is a mindset. We view it as if this was the portion that I always got. So it's not that's not dependent on the reality of what happened. It's dependent on the way the halacha views it. So in that situation, we have two schools of thought, either yesh brira or ein brira. That type of suffix, we're not machmer if it's a davar sheish matirin. That type of suffix you can make by din d'Rabbanan, even if it's a davar sheish matirin. All right, so once we have these rules, right, now the Gemara makes sense. The Gemara in Beitza, because what did the Gemara say over there? The Gemara said, in the case of a d'Rabbanan, was the tchum, it said, if we say ein brira, we have to be machmer. If we say yesh brira, we can be mekel. Since it's a suffix d'Rabbanan, we're going to say yesh brira and be mekel. So that type of suffix is fine. We can be mekel. Now if we said ein brira, we'd have to be machmer, even though ein brira is also a suffix. But that's okay, because ein brira, right, if we would decide ein brira, which would be a school of thought of how we view the dissolving of the partnership, then we would view it as a suffix. It's a suffix in mitzias. It's a suffix of what happened when we divided it. That type of suffix we'd have to be machmer because of the davar sheish matirin. And that's how to explain that Gemara in Beitza. The Shagas Aryeh points out that the Rambam seems to hold of Tosfos. That would be the Rambam in, firstly there's the Rambam Hilchos Shmita, which we already saw quoted, and we can see that again inside Yud Aleph Chaf, that he says, Achen shecholku, that's a gimel in the Mara Makomos, Achen shecholku, kilakuchos hein, brothers that divide are as if they bought, umachzirin zel zeh chelko b'yovel, they have to return the portion in Yovel. It doesn't undo what they divided up originally. Also, the Bechar and the Yavam, they have to return it back. So what we see over there is that brothers that split, we say ein breira, right? They're considered as if they bought each portion from one another. We also see that he holds kinyan peiros is not kinyan haguf. That's an os tes in the Mara Makomos. That's in Hilchos Bikurim, Parak Dalet, Halacha Vav. Hamocher sedeu lepeiros halokeach mevi inu korei shekinyan peiros inu kinyan haguf. If a person sold his field, that the buyer only gets to use the produce, but he doesn't keep the actual property forever. So then he brings bikurim, but he does not read the psukim, because kinyan peiros is not kinyan haguf. Now, according to the Rambam, we end up with a major problem, because the Gemara itself had said that we would have a major issue if there was a shita that held of these two opinions together. One, that brothers that split are like as if they bought from one another, so they only have a kinyan peiros in the time of Yovel. And kinyan peiros doesn't read the psukim by bikurim. If you would hold those two shitas together, so then you'd never have anyone that could bring the peiros and read the psukim. So the Gemara itself said that these two shitas together is impossible. And the Rambam himself holds with these two opinions. He said, how's the Rambam going to work out the issue that the Gemara said would come out from someone that would hold these two shitas? So the Shagas Aryeh explains that if the Rambam holds like Tosfos, so then we can work it out. Why? Ein brira is really just a suffix. There is a possibility that it's his. And if so, suffix d'oraisa would require him to bring the bikurim and to read the psukim. Right? He has a suffix d'oraisa. Does he have to bring the bikurim? So we would say yes, he has to bring the bikurim. And does he read the psukim? It's also a suffix d'oraisa. Didn't d'oraisa has to read the psukim? He'd also, yes, so he would have to bring the bikurim and read the psukim because of this suffix. Now wait a second. In the Gemara though, we said that he would not have to, he wouldn't be able to bring the bikurim, or at least not be able to bring the bikurim and read the psukim. So how are we explaining now that the Rambam is fine, right? We worked out the Rambam. The Gemara itself said that these two opinions together is a problem. So we just very easily explain the Rambam. Why couldn't the Gemara come up with this solution? So he says this is dependent on a machlokis in the Gemara in Bava Basra Daf Pei Aleph. Let's see that Gemara itself. So the Gemara says, Tanan Hasan, there's a Mishnah that says, if a person buys 2 trees in his friend's field, maybe then he could bring bikurim, but he can't read the psukim. Because this works out with what we said all up until now, which is if you don't own the land forever, so then you can't say the psukim. This person doesn't own the land at all. He only owns the trees. So he brings the bikurim, but he doesn't read the psukim. Rabbi Meir Omer, maybe Vikore. Rabbi Meir says no, he could bring and read the psukim. And the reason for this is we're going to see in the continuation of the Gemara is because Rabbi Meir holds that if a person buys 2 trees, he also acquires the land that comes with the trees. So Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Shmuel, at least he originally understands the Shita of Rabbi Meir, that Rabbi Meir would allow you to, or be mechayiv you to bring bikurim and read the psukim, even if you bought the fruits in the marketplace, and you don't need to own the land. Mimai, how do we know that? Midiktani Mishnah Yisera, from an extra Mishnah. Michli Tanale de Yeshlo Karka. We already have a Mishnah which says that Rabbi Meir holds that if you buy 2 trees, you get the land. Then Pshita to maybe Bikore, so then it's obvious that he would say you could bring the bikurim and read the psukim. El Shmami, no, the fact that they also argue about the bikurim teaches us that Mechayiv Rabbi Meir Afbel Kech Peres Menashuk. That Rabbi Meir would say that you could bring bikurim even if you bought fruit from the marketplace. Because we're making a diak, the fact that we have 2 separate machloksim is that they're 2 separate machloksim, they're not one dependent on the other. And this machlok, as Rabbi Meir is saying, is even according to the sheet of the Chachamim, that you don't own the land, that Rabbi Meir would still allow you to bring the bikurim and say the psukim. That's what Shmuel is saying. V'haksiv asher tavi me'artzecha. So the Gemara asks on this, doesn't Rabbi Meir agree that the pasuk says that you're bringing the bikurim from your land, so he must agree that you have to own the land? So the Gemara says, no, your land means Eretz Yisrael. So you're only bringing the bikurim from Eretz Yisrael, not from Chutz La'aretz, but it doesn't matter whether you own the land or not. V'haksiv ad masecha, but doesn't the pasuk say from your land? Right? So it's an additional word in the pasuk, which would seem to exclude a case where you bought just the fruit. The Gemara answers, Lamuti ad masakum. No, that's excluding if the land was owned by a guy in Eretz Yisrael. But as long as it's fruit from land that was owned by Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael, so then anyone could bring those bikurim, according to Rabbi Meir. But doesn't the pasuk say, Asher nasata li, the land that you gave me, that's part of the psukim that you read when you bring bikurim, the yahavis li zuzeh, v'zavini behu. So the Gemara answers that Rabbi Meir would say that's not talking that you own the land, you're thanking Kadosh Baruch Hu for giving you money with which you could buy the fruit. Masav Rabba asked from a brisa, Hakona ilan echad b'so shel chaveiro, maybe v'eno kori l'fishu lo kana karka divrei Rabbi Meir. This is a knockout proof that the brisa itself says that if you bought only 1 tree, so then Rabbi Meir would say that you cannot read the psukim of bikurim because you don't get any of the land. Tiyufta. So that's a clear proof that Rabbi Meir requires you to own land in order to say the psukim of bikurim. The only reason why he allowed you to say the psukim when you bought 2 trees is because he holds that if you buy 2 trees next to one another, so then you get the land also. Amalei Rav Shimon ben Eliakim l'Rabbi Elazar, my time to Rabbi Meir ilan echad, my time to Rabbanan b'shnei ilanos. What's the reason for the sheet of Rabbi Meir when you only buy 1 tree, and the sheet of Rabbanan where you only buy 2 trees, which is both of them holding those cases that you don't say the psukim? So Amar Lo, he said to him, Davar shari yishonim lo amru botam tishalini b'is hamedrash k'il v'aysheni. Something that the earlier generations didn't explain. You're going to ask me b'is medrash in order to embarrass me, and how am I possibly supposed to know the answer to that? So Amar Rabba said, my kusha, what's the question? Dilma Rabbi Meir bilan echad sefuki misafkalei v'Rabbanan b'shnei lanos sefuki misafkalahu. Maybe the reason for Rabbi Meir by 1 tree, the reason for Rabbanan by 2 trees is because they have a suffix. And if they have a suffix, they'll tell you, bring the bikurim, but don't read the psukim because of the suffix. That's what they will tell you to do. So the Gemara asks, you can't explain that's the reason, because do they really have a suffix about it? So Amar lei Rav Acha Breder Rav Abi Rav Ashi Michti. So he says, let's see, psukin inhu. They're just psukim. Likri. So why can't you read the psukim? Even if it's a suffix, let him read the psukim. Amar lei. So he said to him, Mishur de Michsi Kishikra, because it looks like you're lying. That's why you can't read the psukim if there's a suffix. That maybe you're going to uproot the chi of a truma meiser for them, because bikurim you don't have to take off truma meiser. Right? That's the first thing you separate from the fruit is the bikurim. Then you take that to the Beis HaMikdash, and you don't have to take off truma meisers from it. But if it's a suffix, whether it's bikurim or not, so it's true you have to bring it to the Beis HaMikdash because of that suffix, but you're going to have to take off truma meisers first. Because let's say it's not bikurim, and the kohen's not going to be able to eat it without taking off the trumas and meisers. And generally, they're going to think all the bikurim coming in don't have a chiv of trumas and meisers. So therefore, when you don't read the psukim, that's the indication to the kohen that this is not 100% bikurim. It's a suffix. That's why you can't read the psukim. Right, so this Gemara explained to us why, in a situation of a suffix, would you not read the psukim of bikurim. Two reasons. Either one is because looks like you're lying, because you said that you have the land, but you don't really have the land, or at least is it sad that you don't really own the land. That's one reason. And the second reason is the problem of trumas and meisers. So the Shagged points out that there seems to be a nafkamina between the two reasons. According to the shita of michsi kishikra, that it looks like you're lying, so then that would apply every type of suffix. You would not have to, or you would not be able to read the psukim. However, according to the other shita, that it's just a concern for the trumas and meisers, so that would only be a concern in a situation where there's a possibility that it's not bikurim at all. But let's say there's bikurim where they are for sure bikurim. It's just a question, maybe I'm supposed to read the psukim, maybe I'm not supposed to read the psukim. So, according to the first shita, you still can't read the psukim, because reading the psukim when you're not supposed to is like you're lying. According to the other shita, it anyway isn't going to be chayiv and trumas and meisers, because it's for sure bikurim. I just don't know if I have to say the psukim. So then, I'm allowed to say the psukim, because it's not going to cause any difficulty. So that would be a nafkamina between the two shitas. He says, if that's true, then when Rav Yosef said that if I put these two shitas together, the shita of Yorshim that split the property as if they bought off of one another, and therefore during Yovel it's like Kinyan Peros. And we would hold that Kinyan Peros is Lav Kinyan Haguf, then you wouldn't be able to bring Bikurim and read the Psukim. That is really only according to the first shita of Michsi Keshikra. You wouldn't be able to read the Psukim because we have a suffix. What exactly is the status of the land that you inherited? According to the explanation of Tosfos, as we explained. Right, the Ram is going to go with Tosfos. So we have a suffix of what the land is. And therefore, maybe you should read the Psukim of Bikurim. Maybe you shouldn't read the Psukim of Bikurim. According to the reason of Michsi Keshikra, you would not be able to read the Psukim. So therefore, there would be no one that would be able to read those Psukim. However, if you hold like the second opinion of the problems of Trumas and Maestros, in this situation, even if I only owned the fruits of the land, and I didn't own the land itself, I still would be chayiv and bikurim, I just wouldn't read the psukim. So I have a varai case of bikurim, which are not chayiv and Trumas and Maestros. It's only a suffix whether to read the psukim. According to the second opinion, I would be able to say the psukim of bikurim, because of this type of suffix. And he points out that there's sugyas in ksuvas and in Gittin, which prove to us that we are not concerned for the shita of Michsi Keshikra, and therefore the Rambam is going to hold like the second opinion, and therefore according to the Rambam, there would be no issue of bringing these Bikurim and reading the Psukim. Like Rav Yosef, who asks the question of the Gemara, is going according to the other opinion that we don't hold like. So therefore we now were able to reconcile the Rambam, and to explain why we weren't able to reconcile the Gemara. Because the Gemara has to deal with the shita of Michsi Keshikra. And according to that shita, you're not going to be able to bring Bikurim. So that was problematic. But since we don't hold of that shita, so therefore we don't have the question of the Gemara. And of course, this all works only according to the shita of Tosfos, because if the Rambam would hold like Rashi, that we have parts of the land are for sure, the land is a mix. The whole land is a mix of Kinyan Pears and Kinyan Aguf. So we explained according to that, you'd never be able to read the Psukim. Because I don't have the fruit, wasn't nourished from land which was completely mine with a Kinyan Aguf. So therefore, the Rambam would still have his issue of how you'd ever have a case of Bikur where you'd read the Psukim. Therefore, it must be that the Rambam holds like Tosos. The Shagasari continues that the truth is we can maybe explain the Rambam even according to Rashi if we understand the Gemara in Gittin, which is Daf Mem Ches Amud Aleph, the Maramakom Yud Aleph. The Gemara says there as follows: Tashma Hakona Shnei Ilanos B'Toch Sadir Shel Chavero. If a person buys two trees in his friend's field, maybe in Ukari, he has to bring the Bikurim, but he doesn't read the Psukim. Hashlosha, but if he bought 3 trees, maybe Vikori, he would read the Psukim. So Hafadnami is Manchin and Novel Noig. So you have to explain that it's talking about a case where there's no Yovel. Because if there's Yovel, then even if he bought 3 trees and he gets the land, he doesn't get the land forever. He only gets the land until Yovel. So it's still only going to be a Kinyan Peiros, and it's not going to make a difference whether he bought 2 trees or 3 trees. He's never going to be able to say the Psukim. Unless we say it's talking about when there's no Yovel. For example, in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, they didn't have Yovel because he didn't have all of Klal Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, there is no Yovel. In that situation, you'd be able to bring Bikurim. But where there is Yovel, it would only be Kinyan Peiros. You wouldn't be able to bring Bikurim. V'hashra bar Chista machlokes b'Yovel sheini, aval Yovel rishon devrei kol mi v'korei dakati l'samach daitayu. Now Rav Chista, he says the machlokes is only in regards to the second Yovel. Within the first Yovel, everyone agrees you could bring the Bikurim and read the Psukim because people are not relying on Yovel yet. It's an interesting shita, but the way Rashi explains it, we're going to see the Rambam explains it a little bit differently. But the way Rashi explains it is that when they first came into Eretz Yisrael, those first 50 years, they knew when they read in the Torah that it says there's going to be Yovel, but it didn't fully sink in yet because they never actually practiced it. So when they bought land, it could be they knew logically that they weren't buying it forever, but they never really experienced such a thing, that when you buy property, you don't buy it forever. And therefore, it was kilu, they felt that they had a real kinyan on the land. And therefore, they were able to bring Bikurim and read the Psukim even on fruits that grew on that land. After the first Yovel passed, right, so they saw how it works, and it became not just theoretical, but became a reality. So then everyone realized from that point on that whenever they bought land, it's only temporary. And therefore, they didn't really own the land. They didn't feel like they owned the land. And therefore, they would not be able to say the Psukim of Bikurim. Right? It's a major chiddush that, the feelings make the difference of whether it's considered their land or not. But that's what Rav Chista is saying. That's the way Rashi explains it. The Rambam explains it a little bit differently. And that's in Os Yud Beis, our last Maramakom. In the Rambam Hilchos Bikurim, Parak Daled Halacha Zayin. Hamocher Sadeu, Oshemacher Ilanos V'Karkan, if a person sold a field or trees in a situation where a person gets a kinyan on the land, also, if it's at a time when there's Yovel, Hariza maybe the Korei, he brings the Bikurim and he can say the Psukim, but Yovel Rishon Bilvad. Only the first Yovel. Shadain lo sam chadaito shel mocher, shetachlo akarka, because the seller isn't really relying on Yovel to get back his land. In other words, he hasn't experienced it yet. As we explained. It's just a logical thing that he knows about. But if he then goes and sells the second Yovel, so then the buyer is not able to read the Psukim. Because now we have a smichas das, that the kinyan is only on the Peiros, kinyan aguf. And kinyan Peiros is not like kinyan aguf. Now the Rambam, just from the way he says it over, it sounds like it's not dependent on the first and second Yovel of history. Rather, it's dependent on the first and second Yovel of the individual seller. That if the seller himself has experienced Yovel, then that makes the difference. If the seller himself has not experienced Yovel, so then it's considered as if the buyer gets also the land. In which case, according to the Rambam, we can now understand what does it mean when it says that you bring Bikurim and you read the Psukim. Right? The Pasuk says that there's a din of Bikurim with reading the Psukim, and we explained, but if you have this combination of Kinyan Paris on the Yerusha and Kinyan Paris is Lav Kinyan Aguf, so you're not going to be able to read the Psukim. According to the Rambam, you will be able to read the Psukim. For generations, for all generations, there will be people that will be able to read the Psukim. It means anyone who bought land, and certainly some that inherited land, which is only a suffix whether he bought it or not, or a suffix, right, because whether you say Yishbreira or Yimbrera. If the person selling to him hasn't gone through a Yovel yet, has not experienced a Yovel yet, those people will be able to read Bikurim and read the Psukim. So that would be a way to answer the Rambam, even if he held like Rashi with how to explain Ein Brira. So, getting back to the Chametz. We have these two shittas. We have Rashi, we have Tosfos, we have the Rambam, which he seemingly worked out better according to Tosfos, but in the end was able to explain even according to Rashi. But according to Rashi, the Chametz that I split up with the guy is just a mixture of Chametz, which is mutter and asar, and I don't have a rove, and therefore it's not going to help me to say Ein Brira. But according to Tosfos, saying Ein Brira may help me, because it's as if I got the portion of the guy, and if I got the portion of the guy, then the Chametz is mutter, and since it's a din d'Rabbanan, it's only kanas, I can rely on that, and I can eat the Chametz. Now, so that's the way he paskins. He then discusses, let's say I have two partners, and they're both Yisraelim, and one of them sold their chametz, and one of them didn't sell their chametz. And then after Pesach, they split up the partnership. So based on what we said up until now, it should really be the same exact din as the guy and the Yisrael. Right? The guy's chametz after Pesach is like a Yisrael who sold his chametz to the guy after Pesach, and the other Yisrael's chametz is like the Yisrael's chametz in case we partner with the guy. So we should say the same thing. Right? According to Rashi, so the Yisrael's chametz, the one who sold his chametz, his chametz is for sure okay, because he can rely on Yishbreira. The one who didn't sell his chametz, so according to Rashi, he'd have a problem. According to Tosfos, maybe you could be mekel. That's the way you would think. However, he says you can't be mekel by both of them, because for sure there's for sure chametz here. That's awesome, because it was over love of Pesach and the Yisrael didn't sell it. So to say that they're both mutter, you can't say that. So therefore we have to pick and choose. Whose chametz is going to be mutter, and whose chametz is going to be asur. So he said, of course, it makes more sense, Lamaisa, to matter the chametz of the Yisrael who did sell his chametz properly. And why is that? Is because he has more reasons to be mekel. If we say yesh breira, so then for sure he can eat his chametz, right? Because we say his chametz that he got was the chametz that he sold. Even if we say ein breira, so since we hold like Tosfos, he said before, it's a suffix what he got. Right? So therefore he has two svaras, right? Even though we explained before it's really all one suffix, but within this one suffix he has like two reasons to rely on the fact that he got his chametz. One is the svar of yesh breira, and one is the svar of even if it's ein breira, there's a chance I got my chametz. The Yisrael that didn't sell his chametz, on the other hand, he really has two counts against him. Because if we would say yesh breira, then for sure his chametz is asur. And if we would say ein breira, then he have a suffix whether his chametz is asur. So therefore, even though we view it all as explained before, really it's all one suffix, and therefore really we should say each one should be able to be mekel suffix d'Rabbanan. But since we can't, because there is chametz here which is asur, we can't just give a psak that everyone's chametz is mutter, so then we're going to have to be machmer for the one who didn't sell his chametz, and for the one who did sell his chametz will be mekel. That's the maskon of the Shagged. And we'll stop here. That finishes the Shagged Ilchos chametz.